If we're not ready to discover more and to educate ourselves or to fall in love with the world a bit more, then what are we doing for?
River wider than a mile, I'm crossing you in style someday. Oh, dream maker, you heart breaker, wherever you're going, I'm going your way.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. If you guys are new to the channel, you wouldn't already know this, but I usually post videos on Wednesdays and Saturdays, so this is a little Valentine's Day special. You're just gonna have to bear with me with this video, because basically I came up with this idea. This is truly one of the stupidest video ideas I've ever had, but once I got it in my head, it stuck and I had to run with it. So in today's video, I'm basically gonna be giving you book recommendations, but the books that I'm mentioning have to have pink or red covers. So yes, and they're all romance books, but I say that in the lightest way because they talk about something romantic, a relationship, or is sometimes just like a way of looking at life. So I decided to split this video up into 3 different categories. We've got, first of all, people. So these are books that are literally about romantic love or familial love or friendship or anything like that. Then we've got places. So these are love letters to a land or kind of like a people but within a land. The last love letter is to life. I've got a couple of those. They're overall just like a romantic view of life. I thought this would be fun because Valentine's Day is a really cute holiday. It's completely birthed from capitalism and over consumerism, but it is also very, very cutesy. Red and pink. You guys have heard me go on about how much I love that combination of colours, so here we are. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you get some book recommendations from it. So our very first category of books is people.
And I loved their way.
First of all, I've got 2 of my very favourite books, 2 of my favourite books that I read last year. That is Exciting Times by Dolan and Normal People by Rooney. These are both by Irish authors. They both kind of touch on similar themes. So in Normal People, we're following 2 people who are teens through to early 20s trying to navigate this kind of relationship they have, which goes between kind of friendship and romance all the way throughout. There's truly not a better book about 2 people's connection, in my opinion, so this one is fantastic. It's quite emotional, but it's also just extremely realistic and raw, and if you want like kind of like an accurate representation of what life is like in your 20s, probably particularly in Ireland, in this part of the world, then this could be the one for you. Then similarly, we have Exciting Times, but Exciting Times follows one protagonist, Ava, and she is Irish, but she now lives in Hong Kong. She works there, and it's about her relationship with 2 different people who come in and out of her life. And the reason why I mentioned it with Normal People is she's also trying to navigate her 20s. These books are quite different from each other, so if you've read Normal People, don't go into Exciting Times thinking it's going to be the exact same book. Having said that, I love both of them, and I did see connections between them, so if you did enjoy this, you might enjoy this, and if you enjoyed this, you might enjoy this. If you haven't read either of them, I actually recommend reading Exciting Times first, so you're not comparing it to Normal People. But yeah, girls in their 20s going through it. That's that category. Then swinging into a completely different theme, we have familial love. For that I have Malibu Rising by Jenkins Reid. So this is one of my favourite ever Jenkins Reid books. I believe it's my second favourite after Evelyn Hugo. It's particularly lovely because we're following this family, the Reid family. We follow them over a couple of days as they're preparing for this party they're throwing at their house. They've become a very wealthy family, and all these kids are adults now, but we're also flashing back in time to following their parents years ago when their parents were first meeting and falling in love, and the entire kind of backstory of these kids' childhood. Jenkins Reid absolutely excels in characterization, and there's many complex relationships between characters within this book, but overall there is this kind of like strong family unit and this kind of blood bond between these characters. Sibling dynamics were one of my favourite things about this book. Jenkins Reid is a genius, and I really recommend this book. I know that the US cover is technically blue, but I have the UK one, so we're gonna pretend that doesn't exist. But yeah, amazing book if you want to read about a familial dynamic and all the complications within that, but also the love that enjoys throughout that. And then lastly, for romantic love, or not romantic love, but like my people category, we have a bunch of fantasy books. So I'm going to start with this one, I think. This is straight up a fantasy romance, or romance fantasy, I can't remember the technical term, but it's basically a fantasy book with a heavy plot of romance. I'd recommend the entire series. The romance I feel like gets really good in the second book particularly, but the first book has the red cover, and you obviously need to start here. You guys will probably be reading it from the new editions, but they both have red covers. This is my favourite ever fantasy series. I just love it with my entire heart. Every single book in it was 5 stars. So in this we're following Feyre. She's a human, but she gets stolen from the human lands and taken into the fairy realm by a fairy because of something that she did kind of unknowingly. And this was loosely based on Beauty and the Beast, so it's a retelling, a beautiful romance story. And then in this first book you can kind of feel those themes, but the romance kind of changes. It's also so much fun and I love it. The characters are amazing in here, but it is truly like a great love story. You have to read Dakota, come on. I remember like reading it back in 2016 and just immediately falling head over heels with it, like honestly by the first page. Really recommend this one. Then we have a couple more books to mention in this category. First of which is The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Adieh. So this book I read in 2016, I can't remember, it was around then. No, it was 2016 because I bought it in Paris when I was living there. First book in a duology. I haven't actually read the second book yet, which is terrible, so I definitely need a reread of this, but I remember the writing in this was beautiful. This is also another retelling. This is a retelling of 1001 Nights. So we're following our main character, and her name is Scheherazade, and she volunteers to marry the king. She takes the place of her friend who was chosen by the king. Believe it or not, this is actually very sacrificial of her because the king is known for being wed to his wife for like one night, and then by the next morning the wife's disappeared and supposedly killed. So Scheherazade does this to save her friend from that fate, but she finds that through telling the king's stories she's able to delay her own death or disappearance or whatever. And while she's doing so, we unravel secrets about the king's past, which kind of not justify but like explains what's going on a little bit better. It turns into this huge fantasy story, but a really beautiful romance starts to form between Scheherazade and Khalid, the king. I gave it 5 stars at the time. And then lastly for people, we have another Sarah J Maas book, and that is House of Oak and Blood, which is the first book in the Crescent City series. I haven't actually read the second one yet, but this first one I ended up giving 4 stars. I did really enjoy it. There's so many different relationships explored in this, in friendship, in familial, and in romantic love. We have our main character Bryce. We have her exploring the suspicious circumstances behind the death of her best friend, so we have that kind of love going on there. The relationship between her and her brother, which is a very complicated one, it kind of morphs into different things as we go throughout. And then we have a kind of hate to love between Bryce and her love interest in this book, who is Hunt. This is a journey, so it's kind of hard to explain. Basically starts as a murder mystery, and it's kind of like an urban fantasy, so it's set in like a human-like city, but there are different creatures who live in here, like werewolves and fairies and angels. It's a lot, but if you can handle it, then it's a really great story, and I'm excited to read the sequel whenever I do eventually get to that one. So that is all for people, and now we're going to go into places. So the angle has most definitely changed, but that's because my battery died, so I just had to take a bit of time off in which I framed 2 pieces of art as you do. Yeah, like I said, we're going to be moving on to the next category. So these other 2 categories are going to be much shorter, or there's like far fewer books within them. They're a little bit more niche, but yeah, like I said, we're going to get into places.
And I missed their way.
So the very first book I have to mention is one that I read last year, and you've probably heard me speak about on this channel if you are a subscriber or a returning viewer, and that is Joan Didion's The White Album. So this book is essentially a love letter to California. This is kind of linking from the past category because some of it is about like the people of California, some of it is about the land, some of it is about building and the architecture, some is about nature within the area of the world, everything to do with California. And while sometimes Didion is critiquing it, there's always this kind of like great love for this land because it's a place that she's very familiar with. California is very often romanticized, especially the places that she talks about, but Joan Didion looks at it in a way that is kind of realistic and fair to the land, but also appreciating it for the inspiration it has led people to have and the dreams that they've dreamt up there. This is a great book if you enjoy anything about California. It's set in the 60s mostly. Like I said, Didion doesn't romanticize anything, so it's quite dry, but if you want the facts about what life was like but also looks at through love lenses, then you might enjoy this one. Not rose tinted lenses though, because it's not romanticized. Next up we have another one which is kind of a similar idea to that one in the sense that it is a non-fiction and it's also not romanticized as this place very often is, and that is My Paris Dream by Kate Betts. After she graduated university she wanted to go and live in Paris, and so she flew over there. Basically about how she settled in there, follows her career working within fashion, but a lot of it is about the kind of realities of living in Paris as someone who is from somewhere else. I read this summer of 2016, just before I moved to Paris for 6 months, and this kind of terrified me in some ways, but also lent me a lot of comfort because it definitely tells you that it's not easy and things are not as picturesque as they are in like Emily in Paris. I've got many things to say about the show, but also it's such a beautiful city and you do hold a lot of love for it when you've lived there. You feel this draw to it, like Hemingway said. Yeah, great memoir. Also super cool seeing all the fashion behind the scenes, but it's definitely a love letter to Paris. Both of these books are both kind of a love letter to life, so that's the reason why this next category is about life and living and everything related to that.
And I loved their way.
So the first book I have to mention is a poetry book. This is Sun Swallowing by Dakota Warren. This covers many different themes. Overall, there is this great passion for living and existing, and that is why I think it belongs in this video over some of the other poetry collections. Also the fact that it has a red colour, but you know, that's just our silly little reason for it being here. In my opinion, good poetry should have this kind of like yearning and this kind of deep beauty that should be found within it, so that you can kind of feel the poet like trying to tell you about how much they care, essentially. And that is definitely in this. It also touches on kind of like aesthetics that Dakota herself kind of embodies. You can tell that she's just kind of like in love with life and living despite all the pain and kind of darker things that she might have to endure. So I'll read you the back. It says, Sun Swallowing is a sweet and bloody collection of poetry, prose and journal extracts, dancing in the spaces between girlhood and godhood, Saturn and switchblades, salvation and damnation. Her sharp lyricism and cutthroat vulnerability dares you to haunt your ghost back. To relish in duality, think philosophy between cotton sheets, existentialism cross-legged on the shower floor, cheap cigarettes and even cheaper wine, and an oath to reach hell by midnight and be home in time for work in the morning. But this line here, it says, to exist as yourself, deliciously undefinable. This book feels decadent and delicious, and all of that is related to life and living and loving and existing around love. And then lastly, we have a book that could kind of fit in any of the categories, but I'm choosing to put it here. My overwhelming kind of feeling when I finished this book was of appreciation for life, despite it being extremely difficult to live through, and especially difficult to understand as a girl in her early 20s, which is what early 20s? That's not what I'm in. I'm in my mid 20s and having an existential crisis in mid-video. The Adieh by Leif Bassman. My favourite book of 2022. I love this book so much. We're following Selin. She goes to Harvard and she is very much in love with the language and linguistics and everything related to the study of language. She strikes up this friendship of sorts, it's a complicated relationship with this boy called Ivan. Selin is Turkish, she's lived in America her whole life. Ivan is Hungarian, but he's in America to study. And then they take a trip to Hungary. They also study Russian together, so there's many different cultures interlinked within this one book, which is why I said that it's kind of like a love letter in a way to places and people and cultures, but it's also this kind of strange infatuation and unrequited love that Selin has for Ivan. So then it is about people, but it's also about life, because we're following Selin across her first year at Harvard and everything she gets up to right from the beginning of the academic year all the way through until the very end of it when she's just ready to go back again for her second year. This is a great comfort. It's relatable. It's also very funny, very, very well written, and I can't wait to read the sequel, which I believe follows her second year in its entirety. It just made me happy to be alive, basically. Like I've said whenever else I've mentioned this book, I think it's a really beautiful feeling, and I believe that almost every single one of these books could instill in you that feeling. If we're not ready to stop and more and to educate ourselves or to fall in love with the world a bit more, then what are we doing for? So that's it, everybody. Those are my, I don't even know how many there were, but there were a lot of books that are red and pink and also feature themes of love. I mean, you could argue that every single book features those, but those are all my red and pink ones that I could find that I wanted to mention and recommend to you, because I did love every single one of those. I don't think I rated anything lower than a 3-star. 3-star with the Joan Didion, just because it's an essay collection. It connects to some essays more than others. Most of these were 5 stars, and I'm very picky with my 5-star ratings. If not, then a couple like 4s and 4.5 and things like that. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to give it a thumbs up. I'm not sure how many people are going to actually bother watching this video because it's a bit of a weird one, but I had a lot of fun kind of coming up with the idea and then creating it and delivering it to you. So if you did enjoy it, please make sure to give it a thumbs up so I know that you did, and I'll see you next time. It should be Saturday for a regular upload. Thank you so much for spending your time with me and indulging me in this slightly mad idea. I had a lot of fun. I don't think I've ever had so much fun in a video where I've been recommending you books. Oh, it's Valentine's, isn't it? Maybe we need a proper kiss.